this college I've been very impressed with. So today, I thought I'd give you a couple things. First of all, who's read anything that I've written before? Who's read any of my work before? A few people? All right, so we're going to start fresh. Now, this is a copy of my novel that's come out in January from Random House. I got to tell you, to get something published out of New York is a special thing, right? Because you hear about it in films, you've read about it in magazines. I'm just a New Orleans guy, and as far as I can tell, I'm the first person born in New Orleans to publish a novel in New York, maybe in the past 30 years. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's actually the truth. And I've been very fortunate that they've been putting a lot of effort and weight behind the book. They've done a marketing campaign that includes, you'll like this, there's a giveaway. If you go to goodreads.com, put in the name of my novel, plug in, just like hit enter, and you can get a free copy of the book if you win. Right now there are 1,000 people who've already submitted their names to it, but you still have a pretty good shot. Most important question, how many writers do we have in the house right now? Any writers? Y'all are brave. When I was in college, I would never have said that I was a writer. I mean, I would say it from the very start. I think that I was afraid to say it because, I mean, look, if you tell somebody that you want to open a coffee shop, they go, oh, great, you want to open a coffee shop. Or you want to play professional sports, great. You say you're a writer, they're like, well, what have you written? They give you that sort of funny look, right? I didn't say that I was a writer until maybe 5 years ago, believe it or not. And it was like a year before I started writing this book. But once you admit to the world that you're a writer, everything changes. I brought a lot of show and tell today. I never decide what I'm going to read until I get to a place. I brought 4 pieces. This one is a piece, so this is VQR magazine, Virginia Quality Review. They make beautiful books, and this essay is about the feeling of eating in restaurants in New Orleans as a black man or a person of color, and the experience you have with that. I also wrote an essay for 64 Parishes magazine, which is about, well, this is published by Louisiana Endowment of the Humanities, and the essay is about how Louis Armstrong and Lil Wayne in some ways are the same person. So I'm trying to decide that I want to do that one. I also have, I know what we're going to do. We're going to go straight in right now. All right, this story is the story that was mentioned earlier that was published by the Iowa Review. It's called The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You, and it won their prize for Best Short Story about 2 years ago. It's called The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You. You're on the sidewalk out front of the convenience store. The sun beat down like it do every morning. The street cleaner passed by spraying that lemonade smelling water, and they get on your tennis shoes, shoes that's coming loose at the heels. So your socks get wet too. Soapy water drip down the curb. Not like this street stay clean long. Mr. Jelnick round the corner, like he being dogged by something. He ain't too much to look at, Mr. Jelnick. There never is. He like the other men who come down for foot fixing conventions and brain fixing conventions. He got a fat neck and skin like old peaches. His wallet fat too. That's all you care about. Jelnick eye you from crotch to mouth. He pull out a pack, he smoke. He pull one from the pack and light yours with his. Now why are you the only one out here this morning? He covers his eyes halfway. The sun glares off the Mississippi River Bridge like, I see you, boy. I'm the only one you need, you say. True enough, he say. The other tappers already off to work, probably almost done with the men they left with earlier. You got the tip box. The box is for your protection. You wear bottle caps on your soles and dance so people think you and the other boys are cymbal monkeys. A police car roll up the street, the lights flash blue, white, blue, but the car don't slow down, even though that cop lean over and get a good eyeful of your faces. Jelnick's butt cheeks tense up. You can tell him don't sweat it, but you like seeing him squirm. If you didn't like seeing him squirm, you would tell him cops never arrest Johns, especially not Johns from Ida fucking Hope. What you do out here, make the cops puke probably. You see, it's so easy to lock up dudes for shooting dudes. That's good business. But putting a junior high slut in jail, that's bad business. If they hear what you and the other boys are doing, people stop coming to town. You all starve then. The stoplight turned green. The police car pull off. Jelnick's ass relax. You don't really need the tap dance to stay out of jail. But if you don't fake it, what else you got? Jelnick the only one who buy you food after he do his business. And now you sore inside out, but you starving too. The Queenie cook behind you, flipping over those pancakes. Maybe that pancake took your mind off of how rough Jelnick handled you. Jelnick's toast and runny eggs come out first. He squirt ketchup all over. He gulp coffee. Get a refill, gulp that too. He don't give you none. Your stomach growl. When you bring food to the corner, the other boys always take it. He leave you the scraps. In most days, you don't even eat till you get home. But today, you hungry. What the shit is the holdup? That Queenie cook went and back, and your pancake sitting on the cold side of the grill like a frisbee that just stopped spinning. Jelnick been here all week. The first day he show up, he take Pink and Quincy first. One in the morning, and the other around lunchtime. He come back for you after noontime, rocking up the street with his hair stuck to his forehead. And after he get a piece of you, he never buy what Pink and Quincy selling again. That's a plus on top of the money. It's the only time you won out when they were around. Your dog and your hand wavy and good like Pink hair. But now you can laugh inside when you see them, but don't laugh out loud. They punch you when you smile. Jelnick break out a roll of cash. He down two $20 bills. Put them right there in the corner in front of you. One of those 20s is for the food. The other 20 is for you. But 20 won't cover the food, so that'll come out what you earn. When I leave tonight, Jelnick say, I want you to come with me. He poured sugar in his coffee. His finger got ketchup on it that he don't see. He stir his finger in that coffee. I'll get you a plane ticket. And I have a storage unit. You can stay in that unit until we find you something more appropriate to live in. Man, you say, I ain't going to nobody Idaho. Listen to me, he say. You can do better than this place. It's not safe for you here. Nobody mess with me, you say. He put a hand on your face where you bruised from when Pink hit you the other day. And you flinch away. Or you like to, but you don't because his hand is warm. You don't know anything, Jelnick say. I've been visiting New Orleans for over 20 years. You think you're the first one of the boys to stand on that corner? What do you think happened to the boys who were out here before you? You could tell Jelnick about Pink's brother, Simi, who went puff like match smoke last month. Simi was the first one you met when you came out here. He looked out for you back then, but he gone now. You know he ain't go to Idaho. Why you care what happened to me, you ask? Just be back at the corner around 6 p.m. with your personal belongings. I'll be in a gray sport utility vehicle. When Jelnick get up, the stool squeal like it being stabbed. Your pancake black and crusty, still down on that grill. The Queenie cook wearing mascara and hoop earrings, so you know he a full-on Mary. And he flipped that pancake at you. Smack the whole plate down. Sound like it's gonna crack, but it don't. He shake his head at you like he better than you. You wanna jump over the counter and stomp his face on that grill, or make him suck your junk. You wanna make him say your name like he mean it, but he grown. He'll break you in 5 pieces if you try. You be on the wrong end like always. And that pancake, it's darker than you. You don't touch it. You snatch all the money and run. The cook yell after you, but those just words. Lorraine don't have no legs. When you go into the house with a box of chicken and biscuits, she back early from the casino downtown. She in her spot in front of the TV. You bought toilet paper and chocolate milk too. She keep them on her lap, those orange puffs that she's always eating, so the little kids won't get none. None of you like getting close to her. She grabbed too hard. You go to the kitchen and put the chicken down. You yell out the back door for the little boys rolling in the grass by the flat tire pickup truck. The boys are foster boys like you. Lorraine get a check every 2 weeks for keeping y'all. And you don't get any of that money from her, because she call it rent. She take that rent to the casino, and if she win, she don't tell you. You better find your own, she always say. But she eat what you bring home. Her cut, she call it. You go back to the kitchen, you open the box, and that box of chicken is a roach. The little boys come to the back door, screaming and smacking each other around, and you can't let those boys see that roach because then they won't eat. You ain't got money to buy more. And that little bit of chicken you bought ain't enough for all of y'all anyway. You pop the bug in your mouth. Jelnick's storage shed must be a pretty big shed. A big man like him wouldn't have a small shed. A big man would have a shed big enough to do cartwheels in. His condo in the French Quarter is small, but everything in the French Quarter is small. If everything is big, it'd be the French dollar. When he puts you in position, you stare out the window. There's a tree outside with heart-shaped leaves on it. You count those leaves. You never get past 15. In all the times you've done business with Jelnick, he'd never say he loved you. And that's the only reason you listen to him at all. The other ones always love you. You don't want to see Pink and Quincy at the corner, but they tap dancing extra fast. They're trying to wring the last little bit of pocket change out of the tourists before it get dark. The cops won't take you in for hustling Johns, but they don't stand for curfew breakers. It don't look right for tappers to be out on the street after dark, and what don't look right is bad for business. Bottle caps scraping concrete make you sick like you had a crate full of bottle caps. You wonder where Jelnick at now. Where'd he go? It's after time. You wonder if you feel better when he come around. Where you been at, Quincy say? Not making any, I bet, Pink say. Ain't never got his shit together, this one over here. You telling boys to suck a horse, and he howl at you laughing. Oh, you a salty little bitch today, Pink say. You slow? You tell him you ain't slow. You tell him you about to get paid. Get paid big time. You tell him that you leaving with Jelnick as soon as he roll up. Humpty Dumpty? Quincy frown. That man ain't bring you nowheres, boy, Pink say. A gray SUV down the block. It look like it's gonna turn before it make it to you, so you stop looking at it. And Quincy pinch your shoulder. You're serious, ain't you, baby? He coming for me, you say. I bet you 20 he ain't, Pink say. Pink wrestle you and snatch your last from your pocket. It's only a 5. Pink say that'll do till you get more. You tell him you ain't lost yet. Pink say he good for the night and leave with your 5. You only have 1 bottle cap for your shoe left, but you're gonna pass some time tapping out here. Make some change to buy a cold drink because your mouth still tastes like funk. You dance until that bottle cap break loose and roll into the gutter. Something flash. A police car creep your way. The lights beep slow, but the car speed up. You can't see the cop driving, but hands and cuffs press on the back seat glass. Gelnick face behind those hands. You step in the street like you're gonna follow, but you don't. That's that one. So that's the example of how something that you're aware of in life, but not really aware of, can kind of sneak up and bite you. I'm a writer, but I'm also an attorney. And a few years ago, I was driving through the French Quarter, and I said, oh, those tap dancers out there, they just kind of hanging out, they always hanging out, doing their thing, right? And somebody said, no, actually, those boys over there, those are prostitutes. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, I mean, that's how they make their money. I mean, not all of them, but some of them. And so I started investigating it, and sure enough, it's been going on probably for a couple hundred years, different ways. So I wasn't gonna write that story, but sometimes you sit down to write a new story, and you have a blank page, and you don't know what you're gonna start with. And I just could not write that. I could not write that story. That story is in his voice, and I find the best stories I've written are the ones that are like Ghost. They will not let you go at all. They just kind of get into your brain and they seep in and they just sort of push you and compel you. You start writing some other sentences, and those sentences convert to this person's sentences. This kid, baby, would not shut up. And so I had to finish that story, and then he stopped talking to me after a while. So the next thing I'm going to read is an essay that nobody's heard yet. It is fresh off the presses. I call it The Great American Press Release. And I went and visited the Lynching Museum in Alabama, which opened up back in April. And it's a remarkable place, and it's more remarkable for the fact that it's sitting right there we're all in the South, right? But this is the heart of the Confederacy. About 2 blocks over, you have their White House. It's like this sort of miniature White House. On each side of the White House are these Confederate statues that kind of guard it. And so the fact that you can have something like this that acknowledges the past of brutality done under the guise of white supremacy right next to that is pretty fascinating to me. So this is unpublished, maybe coming out in the New Yorker, but I don't know yet. All right. The Great American Press Release. In the moment's confusion, I should say, this is nonfiction. This is a totally true story. All right. In the moment's confusion, I think a fire truck is rushing to save me. But the siren comes from a police car, and the man inside has a message for me. This is perhaps 5 years after Sandra Bland's, Walter Scott's, Freddie Gray's, Samuel Dubos's, or Philando Castile's traffic stops and deaths. So I'm not thinking about those stories yet. This is before all that. I'm thinking about my own NOPD, whose job it is to waterboard men like me in shame. And they're good at what they do. I sit buckled up in my suit and tie, still fresh after a day of working in an air-conditioned office, a law office, 40-odd stories above the city of New Orleans, my home. To say New Orleans is an illiterate town and a poor town is not quite accurate. But we have more folk who can't read and more people who can't make their ends meet than we should. But I can read, and my belly is always full. My Oxfords, freshly polished. Yet here I sit in my own car, in my own driveway, with both hands gripping the steering wheel so that I don't appear dangerous. My tie chaps my neck. So much for class privilege. You see, over the years I had adapted my look. changed my whole life, really, to reduce the number and variety of police encounters. I stopped hitting my windows. I took out my killer sound system. Red cars were out, as well as aftermarket sweeteners like spoilers and flashy rims. I kept my hair high and tight, or shaved. No dreads, no braids, no cornrows, as those were Officer Catnip. I got a college degree, first in my family. Became a lawyer, first in my family. I wish to be the first in my family invisible to the hungry gazes of police officers, but my parents said I was always prone to fancy. The officer who pulls me over is young and white, a redhead, but his race isn't that important. The black cops get the same training, support the same system, and treat men like me the same way. My officer takes a position just over my left shoulder, out of easy view. I can't see him while I'm looking back like that, and he knows it. I try to calm myself. I've been pulled over at least once a year since I was 16, a decade or so earlier. And I know how to get out of this alive, or so I think. I raise the pitch of my voice a few octaves, but keep my volume low. Stare at his shoulder, not at his eyes. Be obsequious, halting, project fear, but not so much fear to make him fear me. That would be counterproductive. He needs to think I want to polish his shoes, not shoot him. But my heart is a kettle drum, and my hands won't stay still on the steering wheel. My defenses are failing. I love myself too much to keep living this way. In the summer of 2018, I traveled with my friend Tad and his teenage son from New Orleans to Montgomery to see the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. These are good, if somewhat euphemistic names. I can't help but think of the locations collectively as the Lynching Museum. So I'm going to the Lynching Museum because I need clarification. Where did my fear of police come from? Where did my fear of white people spring from? How did my dad accept feeling these fears? How did he live this way? The Legacy Museum is a box. Busloads of people disgorge tourists every few minutes, which I take as a kind of victory in and of itself. The Alabama State Capitol is just a few blocks away, and it's guarded on both sides by monuments important to the work of the Confederacy. The fact that the Legacy Museum was conceived, funded, and designed, and open, means that it achieved escape velocity. It overcame the gravity of propaganda in which the Civil War was fought by real Americans versus socialist libtards. Inside the museum, most make a clockwise circuit, but I option right. The museum is arranged chronologically, so the counterclockwise route slings me backwards through time. I have a view with no obstructions of America's behavior towards blacks, from murders, police stops, to hunted freedom riders, through a chamber of secrets where holographic slaves sing spirituals and beg for the whereabouts of their loved ones. Where is she? They ask. The perpetrators of these terrors are rarely seen, which is appropriate. We're investigating a history of pain, and although I'm on the receiving end of the history, I find myself viewing it as one of those recently arrived enslaved humans might have. My God, these white folks must hate me. The center of the Legacy Museum features exhibits about black Americans who were hung by the neck until they died. And I don't remember where I first saw a photograph of a lynched black person. It may have been brought to one of my classes in middle school by a radical teacher who thought our textbooks were presenting the past with too much cream and sugar. However, I found them. However, I found those photographs of mutilated bodies. They've been in my head since I was a small child. Even photos that don't exist. My imagination has constructed complete images from eyewitness accounts that I've read. I've seen the man who was shot 400 times by his tormentors. I've seen the pregnant black woman who was strung up and cut open from belly to neck. I've seen the unborn harvested, entire family lines extinguished. Once in mixed company, me and another friend mentioned how pervasive lynching imagery was. A white friend admitted that she had never seen a single photograph of any of these. And I was shocked, but not surprised. You see, a lynching is a warning. She didn't need to be warned. At home, I surveyed lynching photos. I daydreamed that I could have somehow escaped had I been the target. I could have outrun those men who wanted to kill me, or fought my way free, or shot them dead. But then what would have become of my family, of my mother, of my grandmother, of my aunties and cousins, my uncles, and my friends? Banishing myself to save my own neck would not have ended their terror. And I noticed details in these photos that I had never noticed in the past. The bystanders stood out. These were people who were living their workaday lives. They were stacking hay at the farm, grounding flour at the mill, canning preserves for the holidays. And then somebody said, "Hey y'all, benching today, come down and see it." In one photo, a half dozen white people stand around as if the dead man were a prize fish, a tarpon, or a 200-pound mackerel. A cute girl in a pinafore dress stands beneath his body, smiling a curious, almost frustrated smile as she looks up. In a second photo, hundreds of onlookers, maybe thousands, in fedoras, in suits, in boating hats, in slick dresses, crowded around the charred remains of someone's loved one. And these photos appeared in small town papers and were sometimes even given away as souvenirs, postcards to send to your friends and families, up north, or in Europe, or to keep in shoeboxes, or to place in attics. It occurred to me that like a wedding or a funeral, a lynching was a kind of press release. It was a quick way to communicate a set of facts to the community. This man and this woman are linked until they see tragedy or disgust. This person has left the earth. This person disrupted the natural order and paid the price. You had better not disrupt that natural order. You cannot afford to pay that price. At the end of the museum, at the exit, is a work of art made of wood. A video gives you some sense of how it was constructed. It was carved into human shape, then riddled with bullets. The bullets obliterated one of the legs, and my leg aches when I look at it. In the mid-'80s, the company my dad worked for would throw an annual picnic in the woods near the Louisiana-Mississippi state line. Now, Dad was a country boy who was very familiar with the backwoods. Those roads in the forest were natural to him. So we spent the whole morning driving beneath those towering pines. And those trees were a rich green that I didn't see back in New Orleans. They made me think of Peter Pan, Asterix and Obelix, the 100-acre wood. My dad must have taken the wrong turn somewhere because he came to a dead end. We were blocked by a single bar barricade. And suddenly a Klan member in a flannel shirt appeared, and he carried a long gun in the crook of his arm. In fairness, I had no reason to believe he was really a Klan member. And this detail was never confirmed. I didn't ask him. Would you? But I understand, or understood even back then, that the difference between a rifle and a white hood is pure semantics. Very few of the lynching perpetrators in those photographs wore bed sheets. Decades later, after my dad got sick with intestinal cancer, We'd often talk about what it was like for him growing up in the rural South of the 1940s and 50s, before Rosa Parks, before I Have a Dream, before I'm Black and I'm Proud. Wasn't he afraid, terrified of living amongst those races? No, he said, his hands folded on his lap as if I'd asked him what the fishing was like back then when he was young. We got along pretty well. This may explain why instead of throwing the transmission of the car into reverse and peeling out, he opened the door of the car over my mother's objections, and he approached that gunman. Dad was a handsome man, lean-bodied and self-confident. He was a car salesman. He could talk to anyone about anything. In my imagination, the gunman's face was red with fury. He wore a black armband. And did I detect, even at my cowering distance in the back seat of the car, the trace of a toothbrush mustache? But now I know better. He was an average man, of average build, standing on a nondescript gravel road with an awfully real gun. My anxiety spiked by the way Dad acted as he talked to the man. You see, my dad had two ways of talking to white folks. The backslapping version of himself who would convince a cheapskate he was about to get the best deal of his entire life. And the version of himself that would agree with anything that person said. And it was this version of him who made an appearance when dealing with an irate customer, or an officer during a traffic stop, or a possible Klansman with a rifle in the abandoned woods. Dad's shoulders tense. He nodded a few times as the man with the rifle pointed behind him to the road that led back into the green. And when Dad came back to the car, he said we were in the wrong place. We had to leave. Now, he backed our car away quickly. And from the rear window, I watched that man, legs spread to shoulder width, gun cradled across his body like a lamb. I have no idea what lynching photographs my dad saw during his life. He didn't keep a little folder in my childhood home of black bodies hanging like peaches. He never lectured me on the dangers of looking white folks in the eye. He made his living looking white folks in the eye. Looking white folks in the eye had paid for our vacations, for my education, for my Michael Jordans. And lynchings were not an imminent threat in my life. If my father hoped to grant me a better world than the one he was born into, his wish was granted. Still, neither of us were aware of the lynching of Michael Donald in 1981. And James Byrd, Jr. had not yet been chained and dragged across Texas till his body disintegrated in the early 90s. The National Memorial for Peace and Justice is found on, not a mountaintop, but a hill. Metal rectangular slabs hanging throughout the pavilion display the names of African Americans murdered in a given time in a given place. In one slab doesn't list the names of the people murdered in Phillips County, Arkansas in October 1919, 99 years ago. The designers are not being coy by failing to put their names where we can see them. You see, on that day in October 1919, over 200 people were killed in one mass lynching event. There's not enough space for the names. Behind me, a group of 4 or 5 women wandered through a maze of these hanging slabs. And they're about my age, they're early 40s, but they remind me of the ladies who raised me, my mother, grandmother, and aunties. And I imagine that where I see printed names, they see children born of women, kids they could have birthed, nurtured, and watched, asphyxiated from afar. The floor plan of the memorial is such that the columns elevate as you walk through. And the final set of columns are so high up you can't read them. I'm incredulous that I have to crane my neck to try and read them. And even so, I still can't get those last names. They're too far away. And I realize as I gaze upward with a frustrated smile on my face that I echo that little white girl in the pinafore from 100 years before. Next up is a vast black wall down which water runs. Words admit that we could never know how many people were actually killed by lynching in America. In this section, where there are no names, where the water falls down, is dedicated to those people. I placed my hand against this wall of water. It's freezing. The police officer tells me that he stopped me because I came around the corner too fast. And that's how folks get hurt. That's how I can get hurt. And his job is to protect me at all costs. The side of his car says as much. I've been well protected my entire life by these public servants. They've checked up on me after school dances and while driving to visit my loved ones. Once, as a caravan of my family members fled the state of Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina, one of these servants pulled us over to make sure we were okay and gave me a ticket and said, "Be safe." I did not feel safe. Drowning was one of the only times I felt truly safe. I was at that same company picnic we had taken a wrong turn traveling to with my mom and dad. And the memories come back to me like clips from a movie trailer on YouTube. Me throwing the twist. Another twist? At the annual dance-off. Me running around the woods with my buddy, Tony, an Italian-American kid. And at some point, I board a canoe, and I fall out of that canoe in the middle of a pond. A weak swimmer, I thrashed, yelped, swallowed dirty, cold water. Saw my ancestors in the back of my eyes. Dad was ashore 50 yards away, and then he was with me. In the water, a laughing tugboat towing me back to shore. And I stopped flailing and smiled too, my cheeks warm from the embarrassment of needing to be saved, but my chest warm from gratitude. Inside the Legacy Museum, there are shelves with jars. And on those shelves and on those jars, names, dates, and places are printed on pristine glass that sparkles in the light. The printing matches the information stamped on the slab at the memorial. The dirt inside of each one of those jars is beautiful. Red clay, dusky brown, pepper black. At family reunions in the country, I've walked across that red clay, crumbled it in my fingers, smelled it. My parents taught me a great many things. How not to be taken advantage of by con men. How to treat a girl properly on a date or in life. But they never gave me the talk. And I suspect this is because I didn't need that talk. I've been trained already. As a child of the 80s, I had plenty of heroes to admire. Chuck Norris, Dirty Harry, Rocky. But sometimes those heroes beat up black men in the name of justice in the American way. Clubber Lang, the guy who fought Rocky, Mr. T, if you know him, never stood a chance, even though he was a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier. In the 90s, the television show Cops sometimes followed police into poor black neighborhoods where ultimately the heroes threw black men onto concrete as if they were pieces of wood or toys or nothing at all. Through my early adulthood in the late 90s and 2000s, I watched the local news every night until I realized that on most evenings, the lead story was about a black person who had been convicted in the media of a crime before seeing a judge. In the past decade, I've awoken or fallen asleep to clips of black men, women, and children being executed, including Tamir Rice, shot for playing with a toy by a cop who couldn't even stop the car before he started shooting at him. Tamir was 12 years old. Mike Xavier Johnson allegedly shot several cops and would have shot many more. This was on film. And I say allegedly because, well, not because I don't believe it happened, but because he was dispatched before arrest in a unique and terrifying way. They killed Micah Xavier Johnson with a bomb-throwing robot, which to my understanding is the first time anybody in America was killed by science fiction. A death worthy of a blockbuster film. That these clips are presumably innocent black folks being killed by invariably, well, I'll just say this. The strange thing about what's happened in the past few years is that you can go online and see these killings, and they're always bracketed by advertisements. Who benefits? There's money to be made in removing the other from the playing field. There's money to be made in convincing the other that he should even consider himself equal. If a black man were to become president, and that black man's children would have to look at his name and find an asterisk next to it. You see, he was president, but he couldn't be rude. He couldn't insult people. He couldn't have the same kind of freedom as our current president or our past presidents. I don't have children, and there are many reasons for this. One reason is that I don't want the responsibility of protecting a black child in this world. And this is a change in the way I think about myself. I come from a huge family. 12 aunties and uncles on my dad's side alone. And I assumed that myself would have 3, 5, even more kids. But I've watched my own life and the lives of the black folks I grew up alongside, and I've watched my friends couple and marry and parent, and some parent radically, saying fight the power, giving their kids information about black history and self-worth to be a force field against the corrosive narratives of black criminality, animality, and inferiority. But I can't help but think that those parents protest too much. If a black child born in America is equal to a white child born in America, then why do we have to say it? If it's the truth, why isn't it obvious? A black child understands the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, or letters addressed to other people. Some of the names printed on those jars in that Legacy Museum and those metal slabs on that hilltop are familiar names. You've heard them. One of the names on one of those slabs is George Washington. Another is Robert E. Lee. Here, mothers had named their sons after 2 of the most important white men in American history. And I can only assume that the mother of this George Washington, the black George Washington, gave her son that name out of a feeling of respect for the father of our country. And she may have even thought it could protect him where the Constitution could not protect him. But it's equally possible that the black George Washington's killers were incensed that a black man could presume to be the equal of the first black president, and this might have killed him. The red-headed officer has my license, and he's running my plate. He won't find anything. I'm fully insured. There are no warrants out for my arrest. Even my parking tickets are paid. I know that if the officer led a raid to one of the white frat houses by Tulane or Loyola, a half-mile from my home, he could arrest dozens of offenders and confiscate untold pounds of oxycodone, cocaine, and other Schedule II drugs that would put people in jail for 40 years, 99 years, or more. It'd be the biggest bust of his lifetime. But locking up white drug-using college students isn't the point of his job. The officer hands me back my license, and he smiles at me. He says, "Have a good day." I loosen my tie, but I don't take it off. That's it. Okay, so that was a lot, right? I have a lot of funny stories, but I don't know, I guess I'm just kind of like in the mood right now. So we have time for questions, and maybe I can get some answers. So if you have any questions about things that I just read, or about writing in general, or about New Orleans, or the future, or the past, or whatever, I'm happy to field them. I will say that it's a good time for me right now. My book comes out on January 29th. We're going to have a release here in the city, and I've been I have a tour coming up as well, but I've been doing things in advance of that. I've been in New York twice. Last week and next Monday I'll be there as well for different events and meeting amazing writers. I met Roxanne Gay, who is one of the best writers in the universe. Yeah, clap for her. She's amazing. I met Kiese Lehman. I've met other writers, and one thing that I found is that regardless of where you are in politics, whether you're left or right, whether you love the president or hate the president, one thing that I do admire right now is that everybody's paying attention. I can tell you that as a kid in the 90s when I was in college, we had Bill Clinton. You know, we had the PlayStation 2. There were no major wars going on. So we were kind of like apathetic about everything. And now, just going around the city or going around the country, everybody is like mad about something. And not mad in a bad way. Mad is in paying attention and trying to figure out what's really going on. And I think that we writers have a special duty to try and take what what's being fed to us and put it into a way that makes sense. My novel in particular, so my novel, I'll tell you really quickly, is about a very simple concept. The main character in my novel was an African-American lawyer. Haha, surprise, surprise, right? His wife is white, and they have a mixed-race kid. So this story is set in the future, 50 years in the future, in an unnamed southern city. And the main character, the black lawyer, is trying to force his son to not present as black, because his son is very, very light-skinned. And he feels that like by making his kid like act whiter, talk whiter, avoid black music, he's gonna like protect him from being, arrested or killed or whatever, right? But the kid, who's very light-skinned, has this birthmark on his face. It's a dark brown birthmark. It's getting bigger as he gets older. And it's freaking the dad out. And he wants to get rid of that birthmark at all costs. And so the story in a lot of ways is about sort of two things. It's about what does it mean to love somebody and want to protect them against these forces that are so big you can't even touch them, you can't even see them. And what does it mean as somebody who suffers abuse to resist that abuse? So in writing this book, I couldn't figure out why I wrote it, and the more I thought about it, it probably started with Trayvon Martin. And I was at another law firm back then, and I remember at that time it was a great job. I got paid a lot of money to do it. I got to go to federal court and argue cases at trial, and I had a male secretary, and he looked sort of like Paul Giamatti, the actor. He's kind of short, balding, beard, a little pudgy, but a very, very nice man, my secretary. I mean, we got along fantastically. Very smart guy. He had 3 kids. I think his oldest son had either Asperger's or something that was affecting his mind. And he was so kind to his son and how he talked about his son. But then Trayvon Martin was killed. And my secretary was one of the first to tell me about it. And I was like, well, what happened? And so we got to talking about it, and I found out more about it after the fact. And a few days later, he comes and he says, that kid he got what was coming to him. And I remember thinking, how is this possible that somebody who was such a good person otherwise could miss the fact that it was a child who was killed by an adult? Now, you can make the best case possible, because as a lawyer, I make 2 sides to every argument all the time. You can say Trayvon was smoking weed, Trayvon was an athletic kid, that he was giving some lip, something like that. But the one thing that you can't go against is the idea that somebody's child died. And that's always a bad thing under any circumstances. And so the idea that boy was killed, and that maybe half of America or more of America didn't see why that was a bad thing, inspired this book. It was also inspired by a book called New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, where she talks about a lot of the ways in which modern America has this sort of, it's like propaganda. We're all taught, and it's true to some extent, that we've overcome a lot of things, right? We're taught that we had slavery. Slavery was bad. We destroyed slavery. We had Jim Crow. Jim Crow was bad. It's a thing of the past. It's all gone now, right? But then she said, if you really look at the facts and the statistics, what really happens is we kind of replace things. Slavery died off, yes. Jim Crow replaced it. Jim Crow was shut down by the Civil Rights Movement. Well, then mass incarceration came in. We have these news narratives that tell us that black young men are dangerous, and they were doing drugs and destroying everything. Then we have statistics from scientists who are not Republicans and Democrats who say that pretty much we all do drugs the exact same amount. I don't smoke weed, never have. I don't do cocaine, never have. No heroin, whatever. I'm just a straight-laced guy, right? But basically, 30% of everybody in America does something. Doesn't matter if you're white, black, Chinese, Latino, it's the exact same statistics. And so then you say, well, how does this work? Why is it that the cops will go to my neighborhood in Central City near the old Magnolia projects, but not go 2 blocks down for Red Street by the universities? And you say, well, who does it benefit? Well, I mean, if you're being rude about it, you can say, hey, you know, if I'm going for a job and my friend Tad, like my brother's going for a job, we're equally well trained. He's white, I'm black. If you're a white supremacist, you want to get the job, take me out of the picture. Put me in jail, shoot me, lock me up. And so all those thoughts kind of fit into this book here. And I make it a point to challenge myself and my own preconceived notions. I listen to sometimes Rush Limbaugh, Fox News, Joe Rogan, I read Jordan Peterson, because I'm trying to figure out what's really going on. Because we're all in these bubbles right now. Like we're seeing the world for our own lens, we're getting, like our pressure's going up, we're sort of missing the big picture. To me, the big picture is a very simple, very straightforward picture. It's about money. If you run Fox News, or you run MSNBC, or you run CNN, or you run the Washington Post, you know that if you can upset people, they'll go to your station, they'll go to your website, read your paper, and that's money in your pocket. And you know it's true because we know, for example, that both Donald Trump and Ms. Clinton were great friends before the election. And they're probably still friends to this day. They're both billionaires or multi-millionaires. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not a billionaire. I'm like you. So any questions about any of this stuff? Oh, up there.
Have you ever been afraid to write about what you write about, or to go read what you write about, and have those fears ever deterred you from, or made you erase something that you don't think would be received well?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So have I been afraid to write what I've written or to read it or speak it in public? Quick question, not including the professors or instructors or whatever. Who in this room is over the age of 40? All right, we got a couple, not too many though. All right. The easy answer is this. I just turned 41 years old a month ago. I went to law school when I was 23 years old, finished when I was 25, bought a house when I was 26 years old, made a lot of money doing fantastic, right? And I often felt like I was living the American dream. But in the back of my head, something was saying, Maurice, you're not paying attention, you're not thinking, and you're not being honest. And I would try and write things like over a decade ago, and it just felt so flat and so false. Have you tried writing a short story or writing an essay about your own life? It usually feels like it's just like this simple, like 7th grade piece of work that nobody wants to read it. And the reason why is because you're not being honest typically. Not you particularly, but just in general, right? And so what I found was, the more honest I was, the more people appreciated my writing. I'm not ashamed to say that from 2004 to 2011, I sent out stories to lit magazines across the entire country and was rejected for 11 years straight. They can get a single story or a single essay published in that entire time. Then I started writing stories about black kids in New Orleans, about black families in New Orleans. Somebody came out and asked me to write an essay about gentrification in New Orleans. And the first essay was kind of like mild. It was kind of like, I don't like, shake the boat up too much, whatever like that. But it was okay, and it got published. Made some money off it too. And the more we changed, so like after Trayvon Martin, after the president selected, these things started happening, I got angrier. And the angrier I got, the more I kind of said, you know what are you not putting down on the page? And so the writers I respect the most, like a Roxane Gay or a Kiese Lemon, they will tell you anything. Roxane Gay has written about being raped when she was 12 years old. I mean, it's a horrible thing. She's written it in fiction and it's nonfiction, and it's always horrifying. And yet there are thousands of people who've experienced that exact same thing in their lives, and it's helped them to process their own pain. Kiese Lemon's book that came out last week is called Heavy. I read it before it came out in an advanced copy. That book is about him and his mother. His mother and him are from Jackson, Mississippi, right? So they are from the country, basically. And his mom was a professor, but they felt so much shame because she was being abused by her boyfriend. She had a gambling problem. He started gambling when he was a little bit older, and he had anorexia also. And he was abusing his own girlfriend mentally. Writing those things out freed him and made him a better writer and a better person. And when you read it, it makes you better if you are being open to it. And so the bottom line is, I found that when I read honest work, I make more friends. I like people. I like having friends. And what happens is, if I'm missing something, people come up like after reading, kind of say, "Did you hear about this?" And I'll go, "No, I didn't." We'll talk about it. Go have coffee or have lunch, something like that. And I'll learn things about the world. My world is so much more colorful today. I have more friends of all races and genders and orientations than I did over a decade ago, because back then it's about the appearance, my suit, my tie, my job, my BMW. Whereas now it's about what's real and what's true. And that feels wonderful. And that's how this got published. Good question. Anything else? You can clap for that. Any other questions about anything? Way back there.
So you got something about Louis Armstrong and Lil Wayne?
I do, but I don't think I have time to read it, though. I think we're running out.
What's the name of it?
All right, you can find it in, let's see, 64 parishes. The name of the essay, I think it's actually online now. Yeah, it is. All right, it's called New Orleans Expatriates. And the weird thing about it, I'll just tell you this real quick fact. Both Louis Armstrong and Lil Wayne are from here, obviously, right? They both are arrested when they're kids. Being arrested kind of changes their lives. They both escape New Orleans, get arrested a second time, but then they're adults. If they had been arrested in New Orleans as adults, they would have gone to jail and never gotten out of jail. They were arrested in St. Louis and I think California. So they paid their fines, did a little community service, and had real careers. And also, my own brother-in-law was 12 years old, like Louis Armstrong, when he was arrested for something. And he didn't escape. He was arrested again while he was still a kid, and he's in jail right now. And I guess sort of like the arc of the story is that New Orleans loves its young black men in terms of the culture we create, the rapping, the style, the talking, all that kind of stuff. But the actual boys, I mean, there's a reason why we have this gigantic prison right there on the highway as you're driving into the city. There are not many cities in America, let alone the entire world, where you can leave the airport, drive towards downtown, and pass a 15-story tall prison that is 90% of one race and one gender. New Orleans is a strange place, and it seems normal to us because we're from here, or we live here. But that's the way it is. Other questions? Yes, sir.
You said you're the first New Orleanian to be published in New York in 30 years. How do you feel as a 3-year-old being a voice of the city?
Honestly, I'm very sad about it. And it's a very simple reason, okay? So in that first story I read, that main character, he's a 14-year-old black male prostitute in the French Quarter. Now, that boy exists in the world. He existed when I wrote that 5 years ago. He exists today. He should write that story, not me. And you can hear in the story how I get to shift voices from his voice to Jelnick's voice. Jelnick is this white Idaho guy. He's talking kind of like this. I'm Jelnick from Idaho, whereas the boy has his more New Orleans Ebonics voice. But the point is, to me, it shows you how effective. I'm trying not to be too over the top here. But my personal belief is that it shows you how powerful white supremacy and racism is. We can have a city like New Orleans, which today is still majority African American. And it has been for 300 years. In 1718, it was a third slaves, a third black Creoles, and a third white. You have an entire history of a city that's majority black, and have almost no stories come out from those people. That tells me that we are so effective at arresting these kids or putting them into schools with no opportunities, or giving them schools that are fake opportunities. Go to this school, and we will give you the power to be a waiter or drive a bus. Those are fine jobs. But as a lawyer working downtown in skyscrapers, I know that my white colleagues are sending their kids to private schools. Newman's, Sacred Hearts. Those schools are not world-class schools. They're not bad, but they're not like Harvard, high school. But the point is, you send your kid to one of those schools, they network, they get expectations, they get opportunities, they can build a life. You send a kid to one of these other schools, one of these so-called charters, and they learn how to be obedient. Walk with your head down. Say these words when you see a teacher. You're being taught to not be imaginative or creative or try to find bigger opportunities. And that's why there are not more novels from black girls and boys from this city. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I was reading one of your books about the Old South. So right now, it's still exists today, right? It's
Yes.
still going on today.
Yeah, about the Old South. I mean, so the question is like, does it still exist today? Does the Old South still exist today? And the essay I did not read, that fine dining essay in the BQR, you can see it online actually. That is also about why is it that so 80% of the money in this city that comes to this city is from tourism. That's our main industry. It's not, computer science, nuclear power, or building things. It's about, being a waiter, working in a hotel, being a tour guide, that kind of stuff, okay? People go to New York City because New York City is the biggest sort of cultural city in the world. Everybody's in New York City. You go to Paris because Paris is beautiful. Eiffel Tower, right? You got the old buildings, you got that romance. I watched it over 5 days, right? In my bed at home, I go home after work each night and turn it on for like an hour and watch it. That movie is so persuasive and powerful that by the 4th day, I felt like I had a Horcrux from Harry Potter on my neck. I was like, oh, that freaking North messing the South up. I can't believe this. I was getting mad about it. Because that movie is telling you that if you lived in the South like in the 1800s, you had a mansion, not a yacht, you had like a mansion, you had a horse cart, you had like the fields, all this money and swag and clothing. Life was good for you in the South back at that time, right? And so if you're traveling, you're like, well, I want to go see that, be a part of that. And if you go to certain restaurants in the French Quarter, you experience that. It's like a white person at the counter, maybe you come on in, and there's like some guy kind of shucking and jiving a bit, saying, how you doing? And the sad thing about it is that, unfortunately, like if I had been a waiter in New Orleans, I'd be doing the exact same thing. I'd be like, how to make my money today? Make this tourist feel good about itself. How you doing today, sir? Oh, good, happy to see you, that kind of thing. And so it's a real complicated thing, but it definitely still exists. Yes, ma'am.
You think that's why the blackface is still popular in the Zulu parades?
You know what? So the question is, why is the blackface still popular in the Zulu parade? I cannot figure it out. And the reason why I can't figure it out is because I'm still in the bubble. I mean, I'm bothered by it, but I wasn't even bothered by it like 2 years ago. So I've been seeing Zulu my entire life, and now I'm like, wait a minute, wait. So they're putting on blackface, which was used in minstrels to make fun of black folks, to prove we had less intelligence and humanity than white folks, which kept us from having education and freedom. And yet, Zulu used it as a matter of like pushing back to say that they had their own power and their own strength and their own sort of satire. And yet, you have white folks in Zulu wearing blackface, including a friend of mine who was a judge. So how does that factor into it? Then on top of that, why is it that you only have this one like really all black parade that has to have the whole blackface thing, but you have like white parades like Rex that are 100% white, right? Or you have other parades that were told, hey, you're white, let in some people of color or some black folks, or we're gonna shut you down. And they say, well, F that, we're shutting down. That's Momus and Comus and the hidden crews like the Boston Club, right? When they're hidden, you can't even find it, their butts. Louisiana Club. I mean, it's such a weird thing, and it's so big, and I gotta get out of that bubble to figure out what's really going on. But that's a great question. Anything else? Yes, sir.
What do you think about the future of New Orleans and their writers? And also another question, why do you think some people, specifically black people, prefer to leave the city and not come back? Or they find other cities as more attractive than
Yeah.
staying home?
Great questions. The future of New Orleans and why do people leave and never come back? So, to be straight up with you, the future of New Orleans is a real simple thing. Within the next 50 years, this ground we're standing on won't be here. We know that for a fact, right? We diverted the river a long time ago, and that changed the sediment pattern so that now the Gulf of Mexico, which is basically part of the ocean, is getting closer to us every single day. And once the ocean reaches the levee, which is right there by the French Quarter, and those walls fall down into the water, that's it. This ground is below sea level. And even the ground above sea level by the French Quarter and by the uptown area is so low it's going to fall into that water. And so it could be in 50 years, it could be in 20 years, it could be in 10 years. So it's kind of a moot point to say what happens in the future. You know, there are babies in this room right now, and by the time that baby's my age, it's questionable. Like, can you sell your house in 20 years if you have a house? Who's going to buy it? Who's going to buy a house that's going to get flooded out in a few years, right? In terms of the future of writers in New Orleans, we are some of the most resilient people in America. We've had Katrina, we've had the dot-com bust in the late 90s, we've had the recession, we have corruption, it goes on and on and on, plus white supremacy. We're still here. So maybe, just maybe, we'll have like houses on stilts. You know, we'll still be here trying to do that sort of thing. Who knows? I have no idea. That's a fantasy story. I can't write it yet. We'll see. And then in terms of, what was the second question? Yeah, people leave. So here's something I found out in the past year or two that really just like made me very, very terrified. So in my travels as a writer, I have met, and I'm not even exaggerating, I've met at least 8 writers from New Orleans who I don't even know. They live in New York, Chicago, Pittsburgh, London, Vermont, right? And I've been talking to them. I say, well, what happened? Like, why are you not here? Why don't I know who you are? He's like, look, I went to school up north, got a good education, saw how easy it was in comparison to make a life for myself. I found a good job, made good money. I'm teaching in the university right now. I published a book of poetry or a novel, writing a screenplay, got a movie coming out pretty soon. And like Lil Wayne or Louis Armstrong, it's kind of like, why would I go back to that? Now, I've been down that route already. Years ago, when my house was destroyed in Katrina, I kept thinking I should leave New Orleans and never come back. And I had like a soul-searching moment and said, I got to come back. And I know that for me personally, I was like, you know what? I know that today, my stories come from New Orleans soil. I couldn't write these if I was somewhere else. And frankly, we should have, like I said, lots of kids writing stories like what I had earlier. We should have 1,000 reporters from New Orleans writing New Orleans true stories about this city right now. It's not happening. But, you know, we'll see. I can't really control it, but I can try and have a positive influence on that. Anything else? Any other questions? All right, we're good. That's it. Thanks so much. Hey, I appreciate y'all so much. And look, whatever you're studying right now, keep it up, because your future is definitely bright. And I'm rooting for every last one of y'all. So good luck with it, okay? Take care.